Waterloo has a booth here this week. Go check it out. Tell them I sent you. It'll work out well for you. Yeah, I've done some stuff. This presentation, it came about from the lessons learned of Team 1114 over many, many years. I firmly believe that this presentation is one of the biggest reasons for 1114 success over the years. 56 blue banners, that's the third most in history. Some championships, some stuff. Also, this presentation is like 2 hours long, but the first 15 minutes, not including this part, I turned into a TED Talk, which has gone viral worldwide, and it's special. This presentation is special to me because I don't think it's just about how to build a robot. I think this presentation is about strategies on how to have a successful and meaningful life. And that's why this presentation is special to me. That's why I keep giving it. And I'm hoping you get something out of that too. Or you get something out of it other than like rug burn for the people sitting on the carpet. I'm sorry. Hope it's comfortable. I've spent a lot of time breaking games down, but I've also spent a lot of time designing games. I've designed games that are played by over 600,000 students globally. I did it for the other company. You may have heard of them. We're not going to talk about them for like so many reasons. Currently, I work for First Canada, which is kind of the dream. I went to the University of Waterloo, studied pure mathematics. I'm a mathematician by trade. I'm pretty sure like my path was to be either a professor or, actually it was a really cool story. I had an opportunity, I had a choice to make. I had a co-op opportunity to go work for Goldman in New York on Wall Street, or I had a co-op opportunity to go work for General Motors where the job was run 1114. I chose to run 1114, and here's where I am. I think many other people would have chosen the Goldman opportunity, and they would probably have more money than I do. Well, I mean, they definitely would have more money than I do. But you know what? Zero regrets. Because, like, is there anything better than this? We're at the first championship, folks. Like, this is what it's all about. This is good. So, anyways, enough about me. I'm not that interesting, but I think the content is. 20 years, folks. 20 years. There was a lot more hair when this started, okay? There was a lot more. Was a drive coach then, I'm an MC now, but yeah, it's kind of cool. What's really neat is, while these slides have gone over some cosmetic makeovers over the years, some slides are completely unchanged in the past 20 years. Why is that? It's because these rules are universal. And they apply. It doesn't matter how much first has changed. And we will talk about how much first has changed, especially in the last 3 years. It's weird. You know, 5 years ago, 6 years ago in first, we used $25 motors and $50 motor controllers. And we were happy using them. All of a sudden, we use $300 Canadian motors. I don't know what they cost in America. Sorry, I only speak Canadian, folks. You know, that'll be another story for this whole sort of thing. FRC has changed drastically. How have these rules changed? Not too much, and that's something we're going to be thinking about. All right, what are we talking about, folks? What are we even doing here? So we're going to start off with strategic design, and that is like maybe the coolest part of all of this. It's really wild to me now when I hear people talk about strategic design, because it's kind of a term that didn't exist in the world of robots until 2005, until I started using it, and it's kind of neat how that has just kind of grown. We're going to spend a lot of time talking on scouting. I have a neat case study on data that I want to go through with all of you, and I think it's going to be a fun exercise. And we're going to talk a little bit about alliance selection. When we get to the alliance selection section, we are also going to talk about what it takes to be on a playoff alliance this weekend. I think a lot. How many of you were here for that portion of the presentation? Okay. I thought it would be more. But what's it going to take to get picked? And then we'll talk match strategy, which is, you know, fun. All right, quotes, some things that make me think and feel things. If you're going to walk away with anything from this presentation, it's probably the 2 golden rules we're going to get to later on, but these quotes matter. Enthusiasm is one of the most powerful engines of success. When you do a thing, do it with all your might. Put your whole soul into it. Stamp it with your own personality. Be active, be energetic, be enthusiastic and faithful, and you will accomplish your object. Nothing great was ever achieved without enthusiasm. How many of you are like in grade 11 or grade 12? Good chunk of the room. How many of you are college students right now? Okay. You got a lot of people in your lives telling you what you should be doing, asking you what you should be doing. What is your future going to be? And I want to tell you something. The answer may be simpler than you think. There's a lot of people who will always tell you, you need to go into this field because that's where you can make a lot of money. That's where the jobs are. Hey, in our community, they need a lot of X. You should do this. Which is like, hey, first, we all need to pay bills. At some point in your life, you will need to pay bills too. This stuff matters. On the flip side, it is hard to be good at something unless you're excited about it. So let's take an example right here. Take someone who wants to go study computer science at university. Actually, let's talk engineering, because this room, a bunch of people want to be engineers. No, let's talk computer science, it's easier. Not in that term, folks, stop laughing. You have two people. One person who's studying computer science because their parents told them they should. They said, yeah, there's lots of jobs, that's where the future is. AI is going to automate everything, computer science will be saved. Sorry, spoiler alert, computer science will not be saved when AI automates everything. It's going to be a mess, folks. I have many thoughts about ChatGPT, which will seep out during this presentation, folks. But then there's someone else who's doing it because they're passionate about it. And so when they're in school, like, they do their assignments, but they go the extra mile on their assignments. And they spend their weekends learning new things. You know, they're on Stack Overflow, reading what's up. They are constantly working on their own projects. Well, someone else is like studying and doing what they're supposed to, but they're just doing like what they need to do. So when someone's hiring, who are they going to hire? The one who's passionate, because the one who's passionate can put in the extra time. If you're not passionate about something, you're never going to want to put the extra time in. You're never going to want to go the extra mile. And what I'm telling you is, the most important thing you can do when making a decision of what to study when you're in school or what to do when you graduate is to pick something you're passionate about. Now, that might sound easier than it says, because, like, guess what? It's hard to figure out what you're passionate about. So how do you do that? You try lots of different things. I usually have some moments in this presentation where I know the crowd's going to disagree with me, and so here's one of them right now. I think if FIRST is the only extracurricular you're doing right now, you're doing yourself a disservice. I think it is too early in your careers or whatever you're doing to only be focused on one thing. I say this to a lot of kids with youth sports who are just like, oh, I'm playing hockey and that's all I'm playing. The best athletes in the world all played multiple sports growing up. There's very few. There's the Tiger Woods who went hyper-focused with a dad who was just like, I'm just going to golf, 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 golf. But the best way to get better at things is to do different things. You think you love FIRST, and you probably do. You're here. Why else would you have lined up for this presentation? But you might love something else more, and you won't know that until you try. And so it's really important to try different things, explore different opportunities. And guess what? It's never too late to explore new opportunities. Because I was just talking about the young people in this room. I'm not going to say how old I am. I'm old. But pick up, this past summer, I started running. I love running. I had no idea. But it's just like suddenly I have this passion that I'm very obsessed with, the same way I'm obsessed with FIRST. Lisa's laughing because she hears me talk about it all the time or whatever, But like, plane landed, I was like, I can't wait to run. It's not cold like Canada. So you do these things, but you have to try different things to find your passion. And when you find your passion, there is no better thing than waking up every morning and getting to do what you're passionate about. I get to do that, and it's really, really fun. All of you can have that opportunity. That can be your reality. Folks, we are going to relentlessly chase perfection, knowing full well we will not catch it, because nothing is perfect. But we are going to relentlessly chase it, because in the process, we will catch excellence. I am not remotely interested in being just good. People always ask, how do we win? How do we win? How are the top teams so good? Why are the top teams so good? The top teams are good because good isn't good enough for them. They are constantly trying for more. They are striving for excellence, knowing they'll catch they're striving for perfection, knowing they will catch excellence along the way. Perfection is not real in the real world. In the mathematical world, perfection exists. That's why, pure mathematicians get how the world works. But in the real world, nothing is ever going to be perfect. But if you, for example, there's no such thing as unicorns. Did you all realize that? Okay? Hopefully you all realize that. But if you spend your entire life, who's phoning me right now? Oh, abnormal high heart rate detected. I guess I'm excited right now. Okay. It doesn't even do this when I run. Just chill. 130 beats per minute, whatever. It's all good. What was I talking about? Yeah. So this unicorn, if you spend your entire life looking for a unicorn, you're not going to find one. But boy, you will find a lot of amazing things along the way. Trust me, the analogy sort of works. The top teams, I want a question for you. Are your robots done? See, good answers. People know. The top teams know your robot is not done. There is still time to continue working on it. There are teams right now on the practice field iterating. There are teams who are working on 4-piece auto modes right now because they know that in most divisions, in the average division right now, there's 31 3-piece auto modes per division. That's not a fake number. That's a real number. I watched every single team. What else would you do with your time? But the average division, there's only 5 4-piece modes per division. Teams right now are working on that. There are some teams who've said, we're just never going to get it. And guess what? They absolutely will never get it because they're not trying. The teams who are trying right now, a handful will get it. A handful won't, and then a handful will mess up their 3-piece modes somehow, which is, The point is, you've got to try for excellence. People talk about Team 254 a lot. Team 254 maybe the greatest team of all time. There's some others, in the room represented right here. But 254, what does 254 do that's so special? They go for every single margin. Right now, they are probably looking at their match schedule and looking at every single partner they have, and they are going to every single partner, ensuring that every single partner has an auto mode that works. And it's not enough for them to be like, the team be like, oh yeah, our auto mode works. They're going to take them to the practice field and make them demonstrate it. They are not leaving anything to chance. And this is what I talk about. Some people might say that's a little bit dramatic. It's a little bit dramatic. But that's what you do. You strive for excellence, and you strive for perfection, and you will catch excellence along the way. And it's a really, really cool thing as you go on this journey. Winning an FRC, I don't want to spend too much time talking about how to be a top 1% team because there's weird arms races to get to that level. But realistically, if you want to get to that level, you are playing in the finest margins. It is not that hard to find a top 10% design anymore. Just go to the Open Alliance, look at what 6328 did, look at what 4481 did, boom, you're done. But figuring out because everyone has access to that now, because everyone has access to world-class programming with a Limelight and WPI Lib, everyone has Swerve Drive now. 85% of the first world has Swerve Drive. Before that used to be the thing that separated teams. Now it's a normal thing that just everyone has. So to really find your advantages, you are really playing in the margins, and you're only going to get that by chasing perfection. There are 2 ways to compete in this world. You can drag your opponent down, or you can rise above them. Which is better for society in the long run? Ooh. I promised I wouldn't get political in this presentation. So I'm not going to. People can read between the lines. The quote's from John Abley. Anyone know who John Abley is? Say it out loud. Exactly. John Abley, former chairman of FIRST, also the founder of Boston Scientific, one of the richest men in the world, who gets that our world is more important. And he gets the big picture. And I heard him say this quote at a session he was running on, it was a business conferencing session for a bunch of executives. And he was trying to teach them the point of, if you compete in an unethical way, what's the point? If you are always trying to drag someone down, you're not actually improving. You're not improving yourself. You're just lowering them. And in our society, that's not going to help us out. We could talk about the macro level. Let's talk about our individual life levels. Every school has that guy or girl who is the smartest kid in the school, who's just kicking butt and, winning every award, has the grades. What do they say about them? They probably don't have any friends. They never go out. Yeah, they don't get invited anywhere. What's the point of being so negative like that? What is the point of making those comments? Is it making you feel better? If it does, it's not actually benefiting you in some way. If you want to make excuses for their success, that's fine, but you're not actually helping yourself. But why not go talk to the person and try and learn? How do you do it? How do you pull this off? Folks, this is going to get very directed. In the FRC community, what do we say about the top teams? What do people say about the best teams in the world? Oh, they're mentor built. Oh, their mentor designed the robot by themselves. They do everything on. That's the comments. It's always something. But there's two ways to compete. Because the teams who were like, whoa, can we learn from them? Guess what? 5 years from now, they might be on that level. We've seen this all over the world. We've seen this. I'm from Ontario, if you didn't know. In Ontario, we've seen this happen cycle after cycle after cycle. There was a decade where 11-14 just kicked everyone's butt. And some teams were like, all built by mentors. Cheaters. Let's hack them on Einstein. Hey, for anyone who's in the 3 o'clock session, I told you I would talk about it here. I told you I would talk about it. I am still heated 13 years later. But there were other teams who looked at 11-14's success and said, how do we get to that level? How do we reach that level? And the cycle continues now. 2056 in Ontario, kicking everyone's butt. They've lost 2 matches in the province of Ontario in the last 3 years. Some teams are like, mentor built. Other teams are like, how do we get to be like OP? And we saw it this year. 49-46 the Alpha Dogs, 54-09 the Chargers. Teams came out of nowhere and got to that almost OP level by learning and being inspired. And that is how you compete in this world. This is why first matters. If we compete ethically in first and then take that into the real world, we can solve some of our problems. We might not. If we had this attitude, we wouldn't be plunging our freaking global economy into a worldwide recession. Not political, just like facts. Yeah, exactly. Yes, like, I have a minor in economics, just telling you the numbers right now. It's like, hey, let's just look at the graphs, folks. This stuff matters. Did someone say their stocks? Yeah, you can look at my portfolio. It's a really fun graph. Woo. It's okay. It just means I can't retire, so I have to give this presentation more often. Limits, like fears, are often just an illusion, by Michael Jordan, who was the greatest basketball player of all time. Last night, I got in a heated argument. I was just like, LeBron, really? Oh, yeah, with Evan from 11-14. LeBron, really? Wait, really? Come, someone give this guy a microphone. So, you think LeBron's better than Jordan?
I do, yeah.
Okay, so first thing I want to ask, have you ever seen Michael Jordan play?
Yes.
How? Have you watched a full Michael Jordan game?
Yes.
Where?
I don't remember.
Okay. And so, what's your argument that LeBron's better than Jordan?
I just like LeBron better.
You know what, man? I respect that you have an opinion and that you were able to bring it up. I'm going to give you one of these First Canada Gracious Professionalism pins. You are wrong, but I respect you. Because it's important to have these discussions. It's important to talk through these things, And it's important for two people to disagree about something that is kind of silly and have respect about it. Sometimes you can disagree with someone and just not have respect because it's actually really, really important. There's some things, I'm not going to just be like, oh, this is a fun little disagreement. I'm going to stick to my guns. This is fun. But no, Jordan is the greatest of all time. But this quote from his Hall of Fame speech, limits, like fears, are often just an illusion. In your life, you will have people constantly telling you that things are impossible. And sometimes they are. But often, it is just an illusion. 2022, they told us, nah, no one could ever jump to hang. That's just silly. That's stupid. That's dumb. And 4907, you in here anywhere? No? Okay, well, sorry, guys. They did it. And you're never going to find those things unless you try. And that goes back to chasing perfection to catch excellence. There's all these options out there, but you have to be willing to try. People are going to put you in a box. People have put everyone in this room in a box since they started kindergarten. It is so wild that so much of our personality gets defined when we're like 4 or 5 years old when you go to school and you were typecast on whatever. You were typecast because of the way you look. You were typecast because of your gender. You were typecast because of your race. You were typecast because of what jobs your parents have. And it sets so much up. Guess what, folks? The box that they put you in is not real. You can set your own limits. You can decide who you want to be. You do not have to be that caricature. You do not have to be the person that they decided you were when you started grade 9. This is really important. When you get to university, guess what? You get to reinvent yourself. People don't know whatever it was. So you can be who you want to be. They cut Michael Jordan from his grade 9 basketball team. Just didn't fit. Wasn't the right kind of guy for the team. He could have given up. And then this kid would be right. LeBron would be the greatest basketball player of all time. Okay, all right. I would have an actual argument with you, but your argument is, I just like him better. One thing I will say is, on the LeBron-Jordan debate, I don't know that Jordan's the greatest of all time. I can say that Jordan's the greatest who has ever played since 1987, because that's when I started watching basketball. I won't comment on Will Chamberlain or Bill Russell being better, because I didn't watch them play. All right, folks, let's get into it. Strategic design, where it all begins. Speaking on the GOAT debate, I just want to point out that the greatest swimmer on the planet right now is Canadian, Summer McIntosh. Last year at this presentation, I told people that Summer McIntosh was going to be the next big thing. And then she went to Paris, and she won 3 gold medals. And before she got to Paris, she beat Katie Ledecky. I'm just saying, the best swimmer in the world is Canadian right now, and I'm very, very proud of that. I'm also very obsessed with the world of swimming. I can just split times and whatever. So also, I can't even swim. It's a weird thing, but. All right, folks, strategic design. This is the process on figuring out what you want your robot to do. But you can't do that unless you have a goal in mind. Normally, it's a pretty obvious sort of thing. The goal should be to design a robot that succeeds. However, some people have other goals when they're designing their robots. They want this to be a learning year. We want to learn about pneumatics or something. I don't know why you would want to learn about pneumatics, but dude, pneumatics have kind of lost their place in FRC with the. All right, we're not going to have this side conversation right here. But it doesn't matter. Your team has to come up with your own goals. The goal is to be aesthetics, design, elegance, coolness factor. If you are designing to have a cool robot, just remember this isn't a science fair. There are alliances, and you are kind of responsible to your partners. So if you just spend your whole season just playing around, it's not necessarily ideal for your partners. However, got to make your own choices. Okay, the first thing we do. What is the first thing we do after kickoff? Read the rules, folks. You have to specifically read them in a certain way. The first thing you need to do is examine every possible way to score points, no matter how obscure. I probably should have changed this slide, but it's in there a couple bullets later. It's not just about scoring points. You have to figure out what are the components towards ranking highly. Notice I didn't say winning a match. Why didn't I say winning a match? Shout it out, back corner. Absolutely. Winning the match is literally only half the equation now. There are lots of other objectives. I call them side quests, but they are very, very important. So the first thing you want to do is understand how the ranking system works. And then you see what these objectives are, and you have to understand how you can achieve those objectives. Winning the match gets broken down to the different ways you can score points, and that's what you need to do. So we'll talk about the side quests in a second. But you have to figure out every possible way to score points. And then you also need to think about weird ways to score points. This year's game didn't have a super lot of weird ways to score points. But in past games we have, like last year, some teams figured out you could blow a fan at the trap to pop it open. So you didn't actually need to mechanically touch it. That is beautiful. But if you don't spend time thinking about these things, you will not get to that. So you have to examine all these things. You need to think about ways to prevent your opponents from scoring. There was one avenue this year that I really wish someone did, and no one did. I wish someone built a kit bot. Well, actually, I wish a lot of people built a kit bot. I would argue that 25% at first this year made a bad decision by not building a kit bot. They had robots that perform worse than a quit bot. You know, these things happen when you don't pay attention. But I wish someone built a kit bot with wings. I wish they could then drive their kit bot to the opponent's loading station and open up their wings. With the dimensions in the 18-inch expansion, you could have blocked one entire loading station. Now you might be like, oh, well, we'll just go to the other loading station. You just cut off 30 coral. You've limited them to 30 plus auto. That could actually be really effective at a high level. I was stunned that no one did it. I mean, like, I had a group chat where we talked about it with Lisa's husband, you know, like, but like, it was just like, yeah, like, these are the sorts of things you have to think about them. Sometimes these weird strategies will actually just be weird and not make sense. But by thinking about them, other things get revealed. And you might realize, oh, wait, defense actually matters in this game, which it turns out that's another thing we'll talk about. But it's so important that FRC changed after 2015 when they started adding the extra ranking points. Is now not just about winning matches. It's about securing every extra ranking point. So this year, there's a lot of questions that I get. Why didn't more teams do algae? Why didn't more teams do algae? Algae is so important. Algae is very important, and it's going to probably decide this championship. But why didn't more teams do algae? There was no ranking point associated with it. And so people were like, oh, coral, got to get the coral ranking point. Oh, auto, okay, it's got to move and make sure my partners move. But then endgame was, oh, got to do deep climb. Algae was kind of this forgotten sort of thing. But then that comes back to all the ways to score points. Because when you look at all the ways to score points, and if you can picture what a game is going to look like and you realize something is scarce, there is always value in scarcity. If you can do something that few other people are doing, you inherently have value. And so analyzing the game isn't just looking at the first level. It's like, what is this game going to look like and how do we find our niche? All right, this is my favorite slide. I don't even know why I include it anymore because chokehold strategies are kind of not a part of FIRST anymore. The FIRST game design committee is very good. They are really, really, like the FRC and FTC committees, especially the FRC committee, they don't leave many loopholes in games anymore. Back in the day, they weren't as good. And I mean, it's just like, they've had so much more experience. They know all the lessons now because they've seen things go wrong. But what a chokehold strategy is, a strategy which, when executed, guarantees victory independent of any action by your opponents. It means you do one thing, and if you can, it's going to be really hard, but if you do the one thing, you're guaranteed to win the match. And now, like, all the young heads of the crowd are like, what is he talking about? This doesn't make any sense. What could that possibly be? So we're going to go back in time, folks. We're going to go back to the year 2002. Please put your hand up if you were born in 2002 or earlier. Okay, there's some of you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. There we go. There's some of you. Each year that number gets smaller. No, I know. Emily's a child. She's like an MC, more of like our top Ontario MCs, but like born in like, what, 2003, 2004? I was already in university. Okay, so we're going to go back in time to 2002. The world is very different. The first world it's weird and it's a little bit scary. You're saying scary? Oh, it's different. Okay, so that year it was 2-on-2. We had to enter the area of 3-on-3. 2-on-2. And that game had 3 goals in the center of the field. They were each 180 pounds and on wheels. They are very, very heavy. There were 5 zones on the field. Let's call them 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So if you're the Red Alliance, zone 1 is your home zone. if you take those goals from zone 3, which is the middle start, and you move them into zone 4, for every goal in zone 4, you get 10 points. So there's 3 goals. If you can move 3 there, you get 30 points. Now, there were balls in this game. Balls got you points if they were in a goal, but that goal had to be in your zone 4. So if they moved all 3 goals into zone 4, their opponents have no goals, meaning they can't get any ball points. So that means they got 30 and their opponents got none. The other way to score points was by having robots in end zones. Every robot that was in your end zone at the end of the match was worth 10 points. Notice I didn't say your own colored robot. So if I can just park my robot with the 3 goals, so I mean, who's phoning me now? Oh, heart rate again. Okay. Oh, yeah, Lisa has my phone. She knows it's not that. Yeah. Okay. So it's like, I can't be in the end zone right now, but let me just think about this. So my opponent can't get me in the end zone, but they can get 2 in there, 20, and they can kidnap my partner. Because back then you could do that. I'm serious. You were allowed to grab robots and drag them around. Yeah, this was a thing, folks. I'm serious, the Wild Wild West. You think defense is bad now? Back then, there were no bumpers on robots. Tipping was still sort of legal, and you could just like grab robots and jerk them around. It was wild. Okay, so the most points they can get is 30. So that means it's 30 to 30. It's a tie. Anyone want to guess what the tiebreaker was that year? The number of goals. But you've got all 3 of them. So if you could get 3 goals into that zone and hold them there, you would win every single match. Except the goals are 180 pounds each, and they are spread across the 24-foot wide field. And like your robots were not that big. So Team 71 had an idea. They're like, well, we want to extend our arms as far as possible. Maybe if we can have our robots start upright and then fall over, so then we get a bigger footprint. So they went up to the full height limit. The robot would fall over and then expand these massive eagle-like arms and go, ka-ka! And they had to get to the goals faster than their opponents. So they would go out in a super, super high gear. They had to make sacrifices to get to this high gear. One of the sacrifices was the robot couldn't turn. It could only go in a straight line. It goes out super, super fast, falls over, and has these latches that would lock onto the goals. And the latches, oh, geez, the HDMI died again. Emily, do me a favor. You want to fix this while I talk? Or maybe I got it. Maybe I got it. Is it back up? There we go. There we go. Good job, Emily. So one of the sacrifices they had to make, because they wanted to grab onto the goal tight, the sacrifice was they couldn't let go of the goal or whatever they grabbed. Footnote that one. But now they have to move the 540 pounds of goals. Well, they shifted into a super, super low gear, and back then, there was no rules about metal into the carpet. So they used, anyone familiar with what a file card is? It's for cleaning a file. It's like metal spikes that dig into the carpet. So these metal spikes, and it would move, I think it was 0.5 inches per second. Just, it would also lift the goals slightly to transfer the torque to transfer the weight so they have more normal force. So now they can't be pushed. And they just move ever so slowly forward and forward and forward. When they would take over a match, it was so funny. As first game announcers, we're taught to always make it seem like every team has a chance. But when you were playing 71, I remember there was one announcer, Ron Partridge from New England. He just had this like thick Boston accent. And so 71's got all 3 goals. They're just inching forward. And like he doesn't know what to say. And he's just like, well, it ain't over till it's over. But there's not much hope. And then he's like, first robotics competition sponsored by BAE Systems. He just started reading out sponsors because there was nothing else to talk about. Once Beatty got the goals, they got the goals. So that year at the championship, division semifinals, Newton semifinals, 2002, at Epcot Center. Because, yeah, championship used to be at Disney World, folks. Yeah. Hey, but we're in Houston. Anyways, They are playing against Team 67, the hot team, who was just as good then as they are now. Just this legendary Hall of Fame team. 67 was awesome. And they're playing against Team 68, who was, they used to be called Trucktown Terror. And then, pardon? No, they used to be called Trucktown Terror. And then 9/11 happened. They changed their name. So that year they became Trucktown Thunder. But how Trucktown was known for these imposing drivetrains where they were terrifying. Teams would rather just like hide in a corner. Like literally, I was on a team and our match strategy was to sit in the corner as opposed to engage with Trucktown because we figured they'd destroy us. That's how powerful they were. And so 71 reaches out and they get to the goals, but Trucktown gets to the goal at the same time. So Trucktown is now engaged with one of the goals, but Beatty's got two of them. They miss the third goal, though, because Hot gets to the goal, and Hot has the goal. But Beatty misses the goal, but they grab 67. They can't let go. So Beatty they would always swing their arms back to bring the goals back. They swung their arms back with 180 pounds of goal and 120 pounds of the Hot team. Whoosh. So now they are dragging 540 pounds of goal and 240 pounds of GM robots, inch by inch by inch. Folks, that is a chokehold, and that is what true dominance looks like. Before OP was OP, before 254 was 254, before 1114 was 1114, there was Team 71. They won 4 world championships from 1997 to 2004, the most dominant feats of engineering. And it was wild, but they had a chokehold. Now, there were lots of teams who had the idea of grabbing all 3 goals that year. They figured it out, but you know what a lot of teams said? It's impossible. Limits, like fears, are often just an illusion. So why don't we see chokehold strategies now? Because the game design community knows they're no fun if one team just locks a game down. And they work so hard to make sure there isn't, and that's why they're not there. So why are we talking about chokehold strategies, other than me being old and loving to reminisce about 2002 at Epcot Center? It's because we chase perfection and we'll catch excellence along the way. If when you're analyzing games, you're looking for a chokehold strategy, you won't find one, but you will find lots of optimal strategies. And the game of trying to figure out how to optimize points for your alliance to minimize points for your opponent is how you figure out the optimal ways, and that leads you into your strategic design process. So we get to the cost-benefit analysis. Now we figure out all the ways to score points, all the things that we want to lock down. You need to compare the difficulty of accomplishing each task for the reward to do. It's not just like we have to find the task that is worth the most amount of points. It's about getting high value of points, least effort. You want to do simple things that can get you a lot. And so like Endgame this year, Deep Climb, 12 points. That is a lot of points. It is also very hard. On the other hand, if you can just get 3 algae, it outweighs that. A mechanism that can do algae is a lot easier to make than a deep climb mechanism and can get you a lot more points. And these are the things you have to be thinking about when making these decisions. So, and there's always these sorts of trade-offs. Like 2024, last year, we saw it. The trap was really, really hard to do. But a lot of people were like, oh, the trap will lock up 1 ranking point. You need to do it. You need to do it. A lot of the best teams in the world never even touched the trap. And still were able to seed number 1 over and over and over again. You don't need to do everything in this game. This is a hard concept to understand because, well, actually, I'll get to it in a few slides. I don't want to jump on that right now. The best tasks to perform are those which are relatively easy, yet provide big points. Also, remember, denying your opponents of 10 points is just as good as scoring 10 points, especially in games where defense is valid. This year's game, because of the rules, defense is a lot harder to play. But last year at this presentation, we talked about how powerful defense could be. And then we saw one of the Juggernaut Alliances form, 254 and 1323, that everyone thought couldn't be beat. And then a little team from Philadelphia came out and just dummied them. Just took them to the wood chipper. And it was just like, that's defense. That's the power of playing this way. And they denied massive amounts of points. And these are the things you need to think about. How can you design your robots to do these sorts of things? All right, now we get to the priority list. How are you deciding what you want to do? So you have to figure it out in two terms. One is like, what are the tasks we want to do, like robot functionality? But the other is like robot qualities. What qualities are needed to play this game? Is this a speed game? Is this a power game? Like, how fast should we gear? This year, a number of teams geared their robots like it was 2024 or 2023. Why was that a mistake? So what, I hear fine precision tasks, that's one piece. Short cycles, exactly. You were not driving full field. You didn't have time to accelerate to those high speeds. And so that's why you need to think about these things and determine these qualities right away. Because there are a lot of teams right now who geared really, really high, and then if you watch their battery voltage throughout the match, if you happen to be one of those volunteers at the scorer's table, you see it, it's dipping, it's dipping, it's dipping, and then they're browning out because they're geared too high, and they aren't able to do the tasks that they need to be able to do. At this point, you can merge these two lists and decide on drive system functionalities. This is one slide that has changed a lot over the years. Swerve, should you do it? Folks, anyone want to guess how many non-swerve bots there are at the championship this weekend? The answer is 14. And I believe 11 of them qualified on Rookie All-Star. Folks, it is hard to compete in first right now without swerve. Across the globe, based on the stats that I have, which are not complete, it's somewhere between 83 and 85% are swerve now. 8 years ago, it was more like 8 to 10 robots total in a season we're doing swerve. It is taken over. I don't like this advice because it's expensive. And I have fundamental disagreements with the lack of cost control in FRC right now. I don't think it's healthy for this program. I believe there is no better experience for a high school student than to be on an FRC team. I firmly believe that. I want every student to have that opportunity. But with the current cost structure, it's just not, something's got to change. But that's not what this presentation is about. Okay, folks, your priority lists. Now let's talk about robot functionality. What should always be number one on your priority list? What is the most important thing for your robot to be able to do? Drive. Can someone tell me why drive needs to be the number one priority? Exactly. If you can't do anything else, but you can drive, you can still play defense. And you can still win events just driving. And if you don't drive, you can't do anything else. Now, there was one game where you were able to start right next to the end game location, and there was one team who didn't have a drive system. They literally had no wheels on their robot, no wheels, and they would just attach to the bar in auto and just start climbing. They'd spend the whole match trying to climb the bar. 2013, this was team 2634. That year, I could make the argument. They got 30 points for climbing. That was a lot of points that year. But in general, drive has to be number one. What should be number two? Say it aloud. Intake. A lot of people say, oh, number two should be score. But you cannot score unless you have received the option. And I don't actually like to say intake. I say acquire. Because you don't necessarily need to intake from the ground. Acquire means get to the human player station. Have a funnel. Have a bucket. Have something to receive. Move is your number one priority always. Number two is acquire/release, because you got to be able to do something with it, and then score. Now, sometimes scoring is releasing. Other times there's a more complicated transition right there. Your priority list dictates your entire season. And what your priority list is important for is like when you are 5 pounds overweight and you have to cut weight, you should never be cutting from your most important subsystems. So if it's like, it's just, you always have to be following this. And I think a lot of people lose track because what will happen is they'll have a list like this and deep climb will be 7th. And they just keep adding to the deep climb or whatever. It's like, oh, well, actually, if we just kind of change the geometry of our funnel, that the deep climb fits a lot better. But the funnel was acquire, and that was priority number 2. So that has to be the priority. If you start making sacrifices for your most important things, for esoteric things, that's where it gets messy. And that's why you should have a priority list, print it out, stick it to the shop wall, and look at it constantly, because you will forget about it, or pin it in Discord or whatever you all do. But look at it. All right, folks, other than the quotes, if there's 2 things you're going to walk away from this presentation, I want you to walk away with these 2 golden rules. Golden rule number 1, always build within your team's limits. You have to evaluate your abilities and resources honestly and realistically. So, folks, some limits are real. You have these sorts of things. Your limits in FRC are defined by people power, so the amount of students and mentors you have to actually solve this problem, budget, because we know things cost money, experience, how much knowledge you have, and time. Time's a big one, because before, time was very limited in FRC, because there was a 6-week build period, and then you had to bag your robots or crate your robots. I'm sure a lot of you don't know what that means, but trust me, it was weird. Back in the day, you had to put your robot in a wooden box after 6 weeks, and it would be shipped away so you couldn't touch it. Now you can just keep building whenever. And some teams have the resources where they can continue building and continue building new robots. There's about 25 brand new robots at this event here that have not played this season, because teams have built new robots. That's wild to think about, because those teams, time is clearly a resource they have a lot of. But for most teams, they don't have that resource. So if they try to do something like that, it would end very, very poorly. So you need to avoid building unnecessarily complex functions. You have to figure out what your limits are and stay within them. On the other hand, if you're always staying well within a safety zone, you're never going to grow. There was this neat study they did where they brought in a bunch of super successful people, and they gave them a ring and a post. And they're like, yeah, we'll give you a prize if you can toss the ring onto the post, but you can stand wherever you want. Where do you think people stood? Interesting, you said right next to it, because you could just put it on. But a lot of people, some people who safety went right next to it. Some people just stood as far away as they could because they wanted to see if they could get it on. And there was the people who were most successful actually stood at a point where they would try it a few times and make it, and they would take a step back to see if they could keep going further, because they wanted to push their limits. And that's just a neat sort of thing to think about. You do have to push your limits at some point in first, otherwise you're not going to grow. Otherwise, you're just going to keep building a tank drive robot. All right, golden rule number 2. If a team has 30 units of robot functions and all functions have a maximum of 10 units, it's better to do 3 things at 10 out of 10 instead of 5 things at 6 out of 10. The jack of all trades is the master of none. In high school, this is a very foreign concept, because when you get an English assignment, you don't get to say oh yeah, the teacher says do these 7 things. I'm just going to pick 3 of them and do really well and just skip the other 4. You get your math final. It's yeah, I'm only going to do the first 5 questions. I'm not going to do the other 2. I can do these 5 really, really well. That's not an option. But in first, it's not like homework. You have to make some tough decisions. But this is what the real world is like. You can't do everything you want to do. High school students, we talked about some people who just do first. There's other students who are trying to do every single extracurricular activity that exists. Folks, you can't. You have to dial something back. And you have to dial it back based on your priority list. And just like in robots, your priority list should have an order, I have an order for your life priority list, folks. The number 1 thing on your life priority list is your health. There's only one of you, and you are special and you are valuable. So your physical health and your mental health, I put them together because they are the same things, don't let anyone tell you any differently, is your number 1 priority. Your number 2 priority as a high school student is your family. Because guess what? You only have one of those 2, and they will be there for you. Friends is another high one, and then school. And after school is extracurricular. So first is kind of 5th on your priority list. And you might be thinking, oh, first is more important than my grades. I'm going to break a secret to you, folks. all those people who tell you it's like, oh, it doesn't matter what your grades are. Extracurriculars make all the difference when you get to university and for your applications. They're lying to you. Your grades, or in this country that we're in, your test scores, matter so much more than your extracurriculars. Your extracurriculars can make a difference, for sure, but your grades are the number one thing. And you might be like, oh, come on, how much can my high school grades actually matter? I know grown adults. Did my screen go again? Okay, that's just, I guess the clicker's not. You know what that is? That's when like you run your like left side auto mode all season long and it works and your right side doesn't work and then suddenly the left stops working, the right side works. Like, what is going on? Whatever, look at that. 4 coral on the right side, guys. All right, coming over here. Hey, folks. Yeah, I know grown adults who are like in their 30s and 40s, and their salary is lower than it should be because of their high school grades. It's not like their employers look at their high school grades, but because of their high school grades, they didn't get into the top schools, and they didn't get recruited by the top companies. I hate saying that it matters, because it shouldn't. It's so stupid that it matters. It is wild that employers are making decisions on hiring 40-year-olds because of what university they went to. And the choice of what university they went to was probably because of their high school grades. And we know how silly high school grades can be. But this stuff does matter. So focus on your priority list. But I'm serious, folks. Physical and mental health is the number one thing. And you cannot let first get in the way with that. You need time to rest. You need to take breaks. You love this program, but I see too many students in this program and mentors, especially young college-age mentors, who put too much time into first and sacrifice a lot of things, including their physical and mental health. And that's not okay, folks. We need to take care of ourselves. And if you're just like, oh, I'm good, it's not just about you. Check on your friends. Make sure they're making the right decisions too. Oh, shoot, I'm over here. I like walking to my left, though. This is going to go, oh, wait. No, there's like a step on people there. Okay, trade-offs. You've got this list, and now you're trying to decide between two things on the list. It's like what I talked about. How do you make a decision between, actually, no, I need to go back, sorry. 10 out of 10 functionality. A lot of people have asked me, it's like, well, first has changed over the years, and it's right. And what used to be considered 10 out of 10 functionality might not be 10 out of 10 now. So what makes a function 10 out of 10? In First Now, the key to doing anything well is to do the thing fast. Whatever the thing is, you have to be able to do it very, very fast. So for scoring coral, that means into the human player station. Let's just assume no ground intake for a second. Into the human player station, human player chucks it in, and while it is in midair, you should be driving away, because you should have a sensor that's detected that it's broken the beam, and you're driving away. And then it's going to settle while you get to the point. By the time you get to the reef, the coral needs to be fully seated, and then you need to be up, and you need to be releasing right away. The difference between the best teams in the world and the not-so-great teams, the not-so-great teams get to the peg and then go, and they wobble around, while the good teams, and then while they're going, they're already backing away to get their next one. Their drivers are not sitting around watching. This whole process is probably automated. Do the thing fast, minimal lineup, in and out, and automation, folks. The first robotics competition used to be a mechanical challenge. Now at the highest level, it is a software challenge. And all the top teams are basically using automated scoring now. Get there, get lined up. The driver shouldn't be deciding if it's lined up. Software should be deciding if it's lined up, and it does the and you're out. Last year, if you look at that game, the best teams in the front zone were just pointing their robot at a note, and then the robot would take over. This year, one of the best teams in the world, 63-28 mechanical advantage, they spend more than 50% of the teleoperated period with their drivers not operating the robot. Full automation. It's coming. Yeah. Emily's giving me this look right now. They don't even decide which peg to score on. The robot does. They have someone who's just tapping which pegs are blocked, which pegs are scored on, and the robot decides on the most optimal place to go. The future is now, folks. The future is now. When making trade-offs, remember your initial priorities. Let your strategic priorities dictate your design. You've got to follow this whole process. Okay, other strategic design tips. Let's just go through this fast. This is a must, folks. This isn't optional. There's some teams who get the game and the first thing they want to do is just start designing or start building something. You need to do this. I used to quote this guy a lot, but I'm not going to quote him because he turned out to be not the best human. But you need to know. You can't build a robot unless you know what you want it to do. When you're playing defense in FRC, you want to go where your opponent. You don't want to go where your opponent is. You want to go where your opponent wants to be. You have to be looking ahead. You must know what you want to do before you can figure out how to do it. Be realistic when evaluating strategies. Okay, folks. I had a rule of thumb. It lasted for like a couple decades. It's kind of blowing up right now because FRC is changing. But generally, an elite team can do 10 full field cycles per match in perfect conditions. The best teams will only do this a handful of times this season. These numbers have gone up. This year was not full field cycles. It wasn't even half field cycles. It's like a third of a field that you're cycling back and forth between. So you have to kind of multiply this up. Middle tier teams have typically done 5 cycles per match. Middle tier teams have typically averaged 2 to 3 cycles. You have to be realistic. Here's some data that I have over the years that I've collected. It's the 10-5-2-1 rule. And you're all saying like, yeah, but like 13-23 scores 30 cycles a match. We'll talk about that in a second, folks. Elite teams, i.e. like the best team at the event, usually is averaging 10 cycles per match. This year, more realistically, it's 20 because of the nature of the game. Goods at 4 to 5. The average team is usually around 2 or 3. This year, the average team is around 4. You might be like, 4, that's it? Folks, average means like everything included, including those matches where they didn't move, including the match where they were stuck on algae. That counts as your average. So what the heck happened this year? Here's a graph going back to 2005. I've been collecting this data since I started doing this presentation. There may be some gaps in here because some games just didn't apply. You see things kind of went wild after 2023. 2023, so 2024, and then 2025. Like you see the numbers going up. 2025 is an anomaly because of the nature of the game, but a higher level in first keeps getting very, very high. But notice the mid-level and the low-level is staying the same. The gap between low-level teams and high-level teams has never been bigger. This is not a good thing for this program. This is scary. Late season, we do see that the lower-tier teams get better throughout the season, which is a good thing because they have a little bit more time and they can catch up. And champs, we don't have this year's champs data, but I'm going to say this, top 1 percentile teams here at championship will be hitting 30 cycles per match. Actually, these stats are just teleop only, so they'll be hitting 25-ish because the top teams will be doing 5 Coral and Auto, folks. 15 seconds. Okay, before we get to scouting, I just want to back up on one thing here. This year's game is strange because the cycles happen so quickly. In a normal full field cycle game, the difference between like a quarter second on a cycle meant nothing. It was nothing. But this year, because the cycles are so short, if you can shave a quarter second off, that's massive in relation to the length of the cycle. And that's why teams are doing these weird hyper-optimizations. And that's why automation matters so, so much. It's really interesting to watch a match with a stopwatch and take a split timer and just time team cycles. And when you see like 46-78 in Ontario was just like, it was ridiculous how fast their cycles were happening. But if you just watch them and you watch another good Ontario team, you would think they were basically at the same level. The eye test would tell you that. But when you looked at the actual data, you're like, oh, wait, because a quarter second, the human brain can't really process a quarter second. But you can absolutely process it when you look at data. And that's why scouting is important. So this is an area that's neglected by many teams, but it's crucial for main reasons. I'm going to sneeze. Hold on one second. Didn't need a microphone for that one. Predicting your opponent's strategy for future matches, and it's essential for alliance picking. So folks, I want to play a game here. All right. I don't like it when people ruin games. So we're going to play a game here, but I need to know, has anyone read Ranged by David Epstein? Okay, for the folks who've read Ranged by David Epstein, you cannot play the game. Anyone in this room have an MBA? All right? You might have done this during school, so can't play the game. Anyone seen this presentation in the last 3 years? Can't play the game. By the way, like if you're going to play the game even though you know the answer, that you're just lame. That's just not cool. Like it's just like, congratulations. I'll say like, hey, great point or whatever, but like that's just dishonest. Like you know, it'd be like making something up in your chairman's submission. So, Carter Racing. It's a race car group. They have a massive race in 1 hour, folks. 1 hour, not much time. But guess what? You're helping Carter Racing out. So you're going to help them make a big decision here. They have a race in front of many sponsors on live TV. If they do well in this race, they're going to win some money. They're going to win some prizes. They're going to pick up a lot of sponsors. But if they do poorly, it's going to reflect poorly. They got a problem, though. They've had 24 races this season. And 7 times in the last 24 races, an engine's blown out. If they have a failure in this big TV race, it'll jeopardize future sponsorships and the future of the team, plus safety risks. So it's like, they got to figure this out. The team has a hunch about why the failures might be happening. And so they collected some data. And so they're having a little meeting right now. They invited all of you because they're like, hey, these folks in first, they know what's going on. They're good at this. They can help us figure this out. So they think the failures might be related to colder weather. Not sure, but they got some data. So the analytics group has put together a graph to test the hunch. They got the data, and they're like, let's come up with the visual. Lisa, is my phone ringing? Heart rate again. Anyone know CPR in this room? Oh, sweet, I'm good. Not going to make a healthcare joke. Okay. All right, so they put together, they have the data, and they decided, hey, let's put together a visualization to make it easier for people to understand the data. Here we go. X-axis, the temperature of when these failures occur, and the number of incidents of damage. Kind of a mess, kind of a splatter. But this is what they've got. Today's race is in 40-degree weather. Question, should they race or should they withdraw? I'm going to leave the graph up on the screen. James, get ready with the microphone. Folks, does anyone have any questions? Because you can ask any questions right now. The analytics team will answer them for you. We're not giving an answer yet. We're just asking questions to learn some more stuff.
You said 7 matches, right? Or 7 races that it didn't work or exploded. When was it the last time that it exploded?
The last time was 3 races ago. Yeah, let's go grab some more questions.
What is the average amount of number of races in between explosions?
It's pretty linear. There's not like, there's not a consistent pattern in terms of duration between races with explosions.
What's the average temperature when it didn't explode?
You, my friend, are a smart individual. You, my friend, just saved the lives of 7 astronauts. What? What's he talking about? So here is the graph showing all the races where there weren't failures. Now I ask you the question, should they race or should they withdraw? Wait, you said race? What's the general consensus? Say it out loud. I might want to watch it on TV. Folks, yes.
The temperature is in degrees there on the graph, but it was 40 degrees Celsius.
So it's 40 degrees Fahrenheit. 40 degrees Fahrenheit.
Okay. Thought I saw Celsius.
All good, all good, all good. No, it's good to ask these questions. Good to ask these questions. Yeah. I want it to be true to the original data, so I presented it in the same way. Folks, this Carter Racing is a fictional racing company. This is the story of the Space Shuttle Challenger in 1986. This exact discussion happened before the shuttle launch. The NASA engineers put together their hunch, made a sketch of a graph on a napkin, and they decided they didn't have this data. Well, they had the data, but they didn't ask about it that way. They drew it like this, and they made their decision based on this. And 7 astronauts died that day. And spaceflight for humanity was changed forever. This is powerful stuff. But guess what? You saved them. You did the right thing. You asked a question. All of you who were asking questions did the right thing, instead of just taking the data that you had. And so this is what I want to talk about. What is the lesson learned in regards to first? You need to be smart about data. Just having data isn't enough. It's how you look at it. You have to have the right data, and you must ask questions about it. The amount of times where I see teams who have data, and you ask a couple questions, they're just like, oh, shoot, that average is wrong. My Excel formula was wrong. The amount of teams who make pick lists based on bad Excel formulas because they're calculating the average from the wrong column. And this stuff happens in the real world. It happened at NASA. So don't rely on numbers without exploring the context. And never use a statistic unless you know what it means. And that's some foreshadowing, folks, because I got things to talk about. All right, so advanced scouting. You can look at how teams have done at past events. It's really, really important. And you can further analyze data to find patterns. So when I was in university, I'm a big sports fan. Big sports, still am. And I was always looking to play with things. And I was frustrated because scouting is hard. And also, it can't just, back then there were no webcasts. So you couldn't really scout events that you weren't at. So how do you know which teams were good? And it was annoying because I'm like, in any normal sport, you would look at average score. But in first, there's alliances, and average score wasn't telling me the whole story. So I came up with something where I took a regression analysis of all the teams' matches, and let me just get to the next slide. Basically, you want to know how can I know how well a team has performed without watching their matches? Average score doesn't tell the whole story. So for each alliance, let's set up a matrix, and let's do columns for all the teams. Put a 1 in for every match, there's a row. If they played in a match 1, they didn't play in a match 0. For that match, put the score as your B column. Now you solve the matrix. Now you've calculated the average contribution of each team throughout the event. It is really, really cool. This is a stat I invented in 2004. It's called OPR. I didn't just invent it. My roommate and I. Because what else would you do when you're in university other than sit around and make up stats for first? My roommate and I, Ian McKenzie, came up with this. It's OPR. It's the stat that's been living around for like the last 21 years. It is a really, really cool stat because it tells you how much each robot contributed, not necessarily how much it scored. So last year, it brought us some really, really cool things. Because there would be teams last year who wouldn't put a single note in the goal. They would just pass them down the field. And if you just looked at scouting data, you'd have them as zeros because they didn't score any notes. But OPR would have them really high because they were contributing to the alliance, and the numbers were sussing this out. In 2019, there was a game where you could score cargo and panels, two very different things. And I brought up OPR in a pick list meeting, and someone was like, your stupid stat is stupid. I'm like, what do you mean? It's like, well, look at this team, the Plunger bot. They don't pick up cargo, but they have like a positive cargo OPR. She's like, this stat doesn't make any sense. This is stupid. I'm like, no, the stat is brilliant. Why did this team who had no ability to pick up cargo and never scored a piece of cargo have a positive cargo OPR? Sorry, I'm just going to go with this one first. No, it's all you. So that game, if you scored panels, it created spots for cargo to be scored. So they scored lots of panels, and it created spots for cargo to be scored. So in the matches they played in, more cargo was scored. They were creating opportunities, and that was the beauty of OPR. And my stat isn't stupid. So OPR in 2025. It's fantastic, folks. It is a there's some games where OPR doesn't work. But this game has linear scoring, so tasks remain worth the same amount of points each time you do them. It is really, really good there. It has a little shortcomings. I don't like looking at total score OPR in this game because some teams will play their matches very strategically and won't actually try and maximize total score. They're trying to maximize 4 levels of coral, so sometimes they start doing L1s. But I like looking at total game piece OPR, which is OPR just based on game pieces scored. And that has an incredibly high correlation to scouted data. It's at the point now where there are a lot of teams who find that component OPR is more accurate than their scouting data. Because their scouting data is made by humans who are tired and bored at the event and miss things and forget things. Well, this just pulls it out. I found that the range when comparing good scouting data to component OPR this year was usually plus or minus 2. So it was off by 2 cycles. At the high end, that's not that much. This is a very, very useful stat. It's a great stat if you weren't at the event. So OPR versus EPA. EPA is another stat, expected points added, which they are both very, very useful and good this year, but they're different. And I think it's important that people learn what they are, as opposed to just quoting a stat and just saying, oh, this team has a good EPA. What does that actually mean? And I know my heart rate is up because I'm talking about EPA. OPR is a much better indication of what a team has done in a given event because it only looks at the given event. However, it is a linear algebra approximation, which means it needs a sample size. OPR typically does not settle until the team has played 8 to 9 matches. That means if you're still in the regional system, OPR might never ever settle at your event because you're only playing 7 matches, and that sucks. At the championship, if you look at OPR after tomorrow, it'll oscillate. EPA is a better prediction of future events because it factors in more than just a given event. It's looking at the whole season. At the start of the season, teams have EPA values, which is, they haven't played a match yet. How can they have it? How does EPA know? Well, EPA is not dumb. It knows that 1323 and 2056 are going to be the best teams in the world because it looks at the past. But EPA it stabilizes very early for this reason, but it has a long memory. So it's not great for teams who are trending upward or downward. So this week at the championship, there was a lot of teams who've done some huge rebuilds. And if you're just looking at their EPA throughout the event, they will be underrated. And if you're just looking at EPA, you may miss out on how good 8044 is, or you may miss out on how good 581 is, because they've done these rebuilds. On the flip side, it's a cumulative stat, so it favors teams who've played more matches. So during the season, it'd be interesting because you'd look at 2 teams, one who's already played 2 events and one who's only played 1 event. These teams who've played 2 events are like much higher. EPA accumulates. What EPA is basically doing is it's looking at the teams in an upcoming match, predicting what it thinks they should score, and then if you overperform that, your EPA goes up. If you underperform that, it goes down. There's some weirdness in there because teams aren't always trying to maximize score or whatever, it is a good stat. Is it a perfect stat? No. There are no perfect stats, and I think this is the problem in the FIRST community right now. I think people are spending too much time expecting a perfect stat and expecting things to be perfect. And neither of these stats are perfect, and that's why multiple stats exist. I'm just about done with this. What is even going on? Yeah, I don't even know. Hold on one second. Sorry, folks. I thought I had another slide in here. Give me a sec. Yeah, that's not what I want to talk about, though. Come on. Here we go. I'm just going to skip ahead till I find what I want. Unless I didn't save it. Doesn't sound like something I would do. Sorry. This is really embarrassing. This is really awkward. Oh boy. Okay, well, let's go back. So Bill James, the great baseball sabermatician, he developed one of the best stats ever. Wins above replacement, WAR. It's like a great single stat to kind of all encompass a baseball player. But it's not perfect. And there's this tendency for baseball fans to just reduce everything to WAR. It's like, oh, well, he has a higher WAR, so he must be better, and he should be the MVP. We're starting to do that in FIRST, and it's not good. Where people just assume, oh, this team has the highest EPA. That must mean they're the better team. These stats are tools in our toolbox. Hey, Naki's over here. What up? 2935, Naki. It's a great chant, trust me. But if you're expecting one stat to solve all your problems, it won't. We're intelligent people, folks. We have lots of data, and you have to use it in the right context and figure out what the context is. Don't expect one stat to solve everything for you. So there's a lot of people out there that's like, oh, I'm just going to make my pick list from EPA. No, that's not a good idea. But that doesn't mean EPA is a terrible stat. We can have these discussions with nuance. A stat is neither bad or good. It has a correlation, and it has context in which it should be used. And that's really, really important. And I think our community is missing that whole scale right now. Pit scouting. It's important to know what other teams do. I don't even know why I continue to talk about this slide, but just like today, there's going to be a lot of kids coming to your pit asking questions about the robot. I'm going to ask you something. Be kind to them. If there's one thing that we need more of in this world, it's kindness. And I'm so over teams playing jokes on these kids. Because often the kids who are sent to Pit Scout are sent there because they don't really have a role. It's just like, they just have a job to do, ask questions. And there's nothing more annoying when teams lie to them or make jokes, and like make jokes at their expense. What's the point, folks? Never punch down. Never punch down. And it's just like, be better. I see a lot of dumb things, and it just drives me up the wall. Imagine being that kid who just has a job that their mentor has asked them to do, to go ask these questions, and then they come back with a bunch of like inside jokes or whatever. I don't know. Just be kind, folks. Match scouting. You want to keep track of everything that you can't get from the FIRST API. So this year, you don't actually need to track if a team climbed or not, because the API will spit that out. But it will not tell you how many coral a team scored. It will not tell you how many algae they scored. It will not tell you how much algae they missed. It will not tell you if they picked up algae from the ground. These are the things you want to have. OPR can help you with this stuff and give you ideas and give you hunches, but sometimes you want the specific data. There are very numeric things you can look at, but there are also, who's phoning? What's up? There's also subjective things that you can look at that are really, really valuable. I love to watch human players. It's not just because a fast human player loads a robot quickly. When it comes to the second pick that you're making, and we'll get this in line selection, this year at the championship, each division's got about 35 teams that can do about 15 coral in a match. They're all super tightly grouped together. How are you choosing between them? I want to make sure that my alliance has teams who want to win. And you're probably like, well, everyone here wants to win. They do, but some want it more. And the human player who is like ready when the match starts and is always just like moving the coral, getting ready for the robot, and just whipping it out is someone I want, as opposed to the human player who's just kind of like, oh, it's not my robot, yeah, I'll just kind of put it in. One thing I actually look at is how quickly drivers step up over the line after auto. The ones who are jumping the line right away, they care. They're going to take every single match seriously. Ones who are taking their time, I also look at bumpers, because if a team can put together nice bumpers, it means they are actually care about details. And if they care about the details for their bumpers, they probably care about the details for their code. How do you get people to scout? I get this question all the time. This is the most common question I get, actually, which is really weird. People aren't asking about the math of OPR. They aren't asking about whether Jordan's the GOAT, which probably because they know he is. But they're asking, how do you get people to scout? Because teams seem to struggle with this. And for me, if you force someone to do something, they're probably not going to care too much. It's about finding kids who are passionate about this, who want to do this. But how do you do that? Well, you have to have a culture that respects scouting. If you make the students on your team collect a whole bunch of data, but then the drive team never looks at it, why are they going to want to keep collecting that data? What point is it? It's like humans are very good at figuring out what busy work is. Actually, dolphins can figure out what busy work is. So they actually can. It's amazing. Like you give dolphins these tests or whatever, and they realize it's for a stupid scientific study, they just be like, peace out, I'm not doing this anymore. Dolphins are jerks. I kind of like them. But yeah, so you need to actually recognize these sort of things. Also, don't make scouting a spot for leftovers. If when you're deciding on your team roles, the scouts are just whatever kids are left over, it's not going to work. You want to create a culture where people aspire for this, where people want to be the scouting lead and sort of thing. Takes time, though. 1114 found a workaround to make scouting more exciting. They started gambling on it. Not with real money, folks. They made their own currency, Simbucks, and it's just like a way to make things a little bit more fun. And so people pay more attention because they're trying to win Simbucks, and then whoever gets the most Simbucks wins a prize or something like that. Okay, averages versus maximums. This is one of my favorite slides. Averages and maximums are greatly confused by FRC teams. An average includes every single match that you played, including matches where you don't move because your radio lost power, including matches where you were beached on algae. Teams are always coming to be like, our average is 10 if you ignore the match where we died, and you ignored one because you can't ignore that stuff. That actually happened. Like, you just can't say it's part of the story. Teams usually say average when they mean maximum over perfect conditions. And that's a dangerous miscommunication. So beware of strategists who use these terms interchangeably. That's why you want to have your own data. My personal opinion is, when someone gives me a report on data from a team, I want to work with 4 items. I want to know what their average score is. Let's talk about coral per match. I want to know what their average is. I want to know what their max is, so I know what their potential is. Like, what do they do in their best match? I want to know what their minimum is, so what their floor is. And I want to know what their minimum greater than 0 is. Because sometimes if I see the minimum of 0, it's like, yeah, they got beached on a piece of algae. But I want to know, like, if they had a bad match, where that minimum is. But if I'm already looking for 4 data points, why not just look at everything when it's only going to be like 9, 10, like 10 matches here? I have a question for you. What's the difference at the championship between 5.7 and 5.2 cycles per match? Big picture. Close to nothing. It's 5 coral total over 10 matches. 0.5 times 10. 5.7 and 5.2, people will see that on their pick lists and be like, oh, that's a massive difference. Like my friend from Bread just said, it's kind of nothing. And that really matters. So beware of ordinal ranks. Some teams will pull out their scouting data and say, oh, let's rank the teams based on coral per match, and let's just start plopping them in. I like to group teams into tiers. Group them into a tier, and then sort within the tier. And it's not necessarily about what has the highest number in there, but then you start having discussions about those teams. This is so, so important at the championship event. In each division, there's a group of teams, some divisions it's like 2, some divisions it's like 6, that are stand above. Then there's a group of like 30 who are all very, very similar. Their numbers are the same. So how are you deciding between them? You have to split those tiers up. And we're going to get to this when we talk alliance selection. Or maybe we'll just talk about it on this slide. How do you decide when teams have similar data? You have to look at compatibility. You have to look at what strategy you want to play and do they fill that need. And you have to look at, can you work with them? There's this thread on Chief Delphi, and people are like, oh, should you go pitch yourself to the top teams? And everyone's like, no, don't talk. Teams just make their decisions based on data. That is nonsense. If FRC teams are not this sort of world where everyone thinks that everyone's just using data, no way. No way, because we're humans. We can think more than just a spreadsheet. And it's important to utilize all our observations when making these sorts of decisions. And some of those observations will literally be when you come to their pit and chat with them. Most teams, the most important thing with sorting out a tier is teams that I know and I can work with. Teams that I like. Folks, the amount of times where teams have to choose between 2 teams and it comes down to, yeah, but they're so much fun to work with and they're kind of jerks. It is absolutely real. And it actually matters. Again, folks, be kind. It gets you places. Okay, alliance selection. Let me see. How are we doing on time here? Oh, boy. Yeah. All right, we're going to start skipping slides. Hey, okay, I want to talk about one piece about alliance selection. We're at the championship event, and things get weird. This is for alliance selection and for match strategy. If someone who is not in your division comes to you this weekend, especially if you're like a top-ranked team, and they want to offer you advice for strategy or advice for your pick list, warning, warning, danger, danger, red flag, red flag. Why are they doing this? Maybe they're just not affiliated with the team and just want to give you advice. Or maybe they have an ulterior motive about something that's going to benefit their team in another division. Already happening, folks, this weekend. Already happening. Sometimes it doesn't go to top teams. Sometimes teams go to teams who are way down there in the rankings, but they have a match with the top team. And they're like, oh, if we can make sure that that top team doesn't win this match, then the two top teams of this division will get split up, and maybe I have a better chance of winning championship. First, that is such galaxy brain nonsense. That's not going to get you anywhere. But it's messy, folks. And it happens every year at the championship. So just keep your eyes open for that. Especially when people start saying, hey, maybe you don't want to run your auto this match. It'd be better if you don't run your auto, you can just start teleop fresh or whatever. They're trying to get you to throw the auto ranking point to hurt a team. It is absolutely against the rules. But you know where the rules get really messy? If a team does it outside their division. Or if the person's not affiliated with the team because they're an alumni who's not technically with the team. Folks, just be careful out there. This also comes up with alliance selection. This is always the question. If we're the number 1 seed and we know a bunch of people are going to decline us, should we still pick them? Yes. Force the decline, force the breakups. There will be people who tell you, don't do that. That's not graciously professional. No, they're doing that because they want to make sure that they don't have to decline because they want to be with someone else. You have earned the number 1 seed. You've earned the right to do what you want. And you should absolutely use that power as the number 1 seed to force people to decline, to break up alliances. That is your best chance of winning. I have seen teams lose the championship because they decided not to burn because someone convinced them. And I've seen other teams who convinced them win the championship. Absolutely, this stuff happens. And it will happen this weekend. But all of you came to this presentation. And hopefully you'll get it right. Your alliance selection strategy should be different based on selection point. If you were the number 1 seed, you should be picking consistency in both your first and second pick and third pick. You are the number 1 seed. You are probably very good. But if you were alliance captain number 8, you got to be picking upside. So the team that has done 25 in a match but got beat on algae 3 times, go for it. Take the 25 and hope that's what they hit. If they don't, if they get beached on algae, you're going to lose. That's fine. But you're probably going to lose anyways, folks. You're the 8 Alliance. It's really hard. So you've got to take your best shot. And so you've got to go high risk, high volatility, high standard deviation. All right, folks, this is probably where we're going to finish because I went way long. How do you get picked this weekend? Well, first of all, you got to figure out what your goals are. Do you want to be a top 1 through 3 picker, 4 through 8, first round, second round, third round? But you have to be realistic, and you have to demonstrate what's in demand. Coming into this season, I thought this presentation was going to be a debate between 2 offense plus 1 defense versus 3 offense. At the beginning of the season, I was like 100% 2 offense plus 1 defense. But there are so many teams that can score like 15 coral a match. And it is hard for a defense robot to deny 15 coral. While I think there is still value in some strategic defense, I think this is a 3 offense game. So I'm not even going to talk too much about the defender. But if you really want to be picked as a defender, folks, you need to start tomorrow morning in your first match. You need to demonstrate defense. If you ever want to be picked for defense, you have to demonstrate it. And the way you demonstrate it is you defend the best robots. If you can show that you can shut down a great robot, then you have a shot at being picked for defense. Otherwise, it's probably not happening this weekend. Here are the things that I think, and actually I changed my mind on this. The things that are going to be most valuable as a second pick at the championship are, in some order, not necessarily this order, the ability to do L1 rapidly. Not L2, 3, 4, L1, because that is what's scarce. Lots of teams can do 2, 3, and 4. The reef is going to max with the top 2 teams, so if you want to be a second pick, if you can do L1, that's massive. You need to be able to score algae, specifically algae off the floor. If you have the ability to go to the other side of the field and pick up algae and score it, you are in demand, folks. Ontario Provincial Championship, the only way that alliances got close to 2056, the way that 4946, 5409 got close, and the way that 1114 and I forget 610, 1114 and 610 got close, was they had wicked algae bots in the second round. 772 and 7476, who were going to the other side of the field and stealing algae. They still didn't win, but they got closer. And that's how you're going to pull off an upset. And then the deep climb. Those are the things that you need to be able to do. It is so hard to separate yourself as a coral bot. So at some point, if you are a coral bot, if you have algae ability, you better be demonstrating that algae ability so you have it on record. Because people are much more likely to pick a team that has shown something as opposed to a team that can do something, but it's hypothetical. And you need to prove it. Anyone have any questions about getting picked this week? Anything you want to ask right now? Because this is your best shot. Okay. I thought there'd be more questions. James, you want to hit that?
Does it always make sense for the second pick to be the one going to the other side of the field? Don't you want, if you have a captain that's really good at going at ground intake, wouldn't you want your team that's had the 118 tier practice field and the 118 tier driving to go over the other side of the field and avoid all those penalties?
So it's a great point. It's a great point. Algae scaring is, good ground algae is so scarce, and there are so many coral scoring robots that it might make sense for the captain to be the one who's going over and doing the algae. And then you just pick the team that can just absolutely do the most coral and let them do it. You know, there's going to be teams who can regularly rip off full reefs as second picks. So absolutely, algae is a scarce sort of thing. And as for going to the other side of the field, I want the team who's actually done it to be the one doing it. Because if you haven't driven across the field, it's scary. In games where you do it regularly, you just get used to it. But a lot of drivers don't have experience with it. And so I think but you are right that a team with a good driver who has a lot of practice is more likely to be able to do that well. So that is a good point. Oh, right there.
So how do you convince your team to do something, like if they're all set on doing one thing and it's like really, like it's the thing that's not scarce?
So trying to convince your own team?
Yeah.
You got to show them the data. You got to show them the numbers. You got to make. Don't make an emotional argument. Make a data-driven argument on why you think this makes sense. Explain these numbers. Don't do an appeal. Like, you could be like, oh, Karthik said that. That's not a good argument.
Yeah.
A good argument is, hey, take a look at these numbers. We can hit these numbers, and if we hit these numbers, we're the only ones doing it, and all of a sudden, we're more likely to get picked. But always come to the battle with data, not vibes.
Yeah, so how do you rank defense, since like defense is so up to like the perspective, like
I mean, defense is really hard to figure out. Literally, as they open the doors and say the presentation's over. I'm going to answer your question really quickly. The way you rank defense is the amount of game pieces they denied and how well they did at shutting down great robots. Okay, I want to get to the end here, so we're skipping this whole section. We're just going to flick across. I want to wrap up here. I know they're going to throw us out soon. Yeah, there we go, final comments. Folks, number one thing, read the rules. Okay, I'm done. I'm done with slides. Folks, I want you to relentlessly chase perfection and catch excellence along the way. I want you to compete ethically and do the right thing. I want you to be kind. I want you to treat people with respect. Folks, I had a professor at the University of Waterloo who would end off every semester, and he would say, I don't want to wish you luck, because luck is something that you can't control. It's esoteric. I would much rather wish you success. All of you, I wish you success this week at the championship, and I wish you success in life. Good luck. Folks, I will be available outside for more questions. We can't take them in this room. We do have to clear the room. I'll be outside for questions, pictures, and autographs if you want.